So the first thing that I want to do is talk about what an API is to make sure that we are on the same page, that we know what it is, how it works. That way we're not confused when we're working with them. So it stands for Application Programming Interface. And application can be a very wide term. So it can include anything from databases online to somebody setting up a website that has some information that you can access. It doesn't have to be a big application like Facebook. It could be something very small and very specific. We're going to be working with 3 different APIs, and they are going to be a Pokemon database interface, the Giphy database interface, and the YouTube API. So we're going to be calling different requests to each of those, and those are different applications. And the way that that actually works is you put in a URL request, usually called a GET request, G-E-T, with the information that you want to get back. So here is the Poke API, the RESTful Pokemon API, and REST stands for Representational State Transfer, which isn't important. Just know that most APIs on the web are RESTful in the sense that they all maintain the same way that they work and what they give back to you. So if we want to get information from this API, what we do is we put in this address and then we pass in the information that we want specifically. So if I type in Pokemon / and here they tell you how to use it, so you can put in a number, but you can also type in a specific Pokemon. So if I type in Pikachu and I press submit, this is going to go out, fetch that data, and come back with all of this information about that Pokemon in JSON format. And JSON is JavaScript Object Notation, which I'm going to talk more about in the next video. But just know that that's how you get most information, especially with API calls, because it's small and it's quick and it is universal at this point. So it's easy to work with across many different platforms, and it's going to be the same across most API calls. So an API is a way that an application can set up other people accessing their information. It is a fantastic form, and it's how information is shared across the internet. So most companies have an API that you can access. If you want to learn about movies and you want to pull down movie information, making a website or an application, you're probably going to want to use the Open Movie Database that has API calls for it, and you can get information about movies. If you want weather, you can do that. If you want the pH of the water in your local area, there's an API call for that. You can use APIs with Facebook and Instagram and Spotify. So if you want to build an app or a website or whatever, and you want to get information from one of their websites, then you use their APIs. It's for developers to use to get information. Now, the type of information that's available is completely up to the developers of that API. So if you are trying to work with Facebook, they may severely limit what you're allowed to get from a user without express permission, or you can't touch their friends or things like that. They get to choose what you're allowed to get and what you're not allowed to get. So that's up to them. And also, really important is the documentation. Good documentation for an API is essential. If you run into an API that doesn't have good docs, you're going to be doing a lot of Google searching. The ones that we are going to be using will have fantastic documentation, and I'll show you how to read those and then implement them in pretty straightforward ways. So if you want to use an API, definitely check out their documentation first, and if they don't have good documentation, I'd look somewhere else if at all possible. Because when using APIs, you want to know what it's supposed to do and what you're supposed to get back. Otherwise, it can be very difficult to use correctly. So that's an API in a nutshell. Get information from somewhere else in a specific format, usually JSON, which then you, as the developer of whatever you're developing, get to parse and put where you want. So we're going to be using 3 APIs throughout this series, and I'm going to be going over each one as we get to it, and hopefully by the end, you will be pretty much an expert on how to use RESTful APIs.